Bien plus que l'objet de masse détenu par au moins 3/4 de la population africaine, le téléphone portable, qui a connu une croissance ultra rapide, est devenu une arme politique mondiale utilisée pour dénoncer des pratiques tyranniques ou pour traquer des dissidents. Pourtant, il y a 20 ans, personne n'avait anticipé le fabuleux destin du téléphone portable en Afrique, à part Mo Ibrahim, cet ingénieur soudanais qui voit le marché porteur que représente alors ce continent. Avec sa compagnie, Celtel, il construit des réseaux mobiles de Libreville à Freetown et initie le développement d'une des industries les plus dynamiques au monde. Grâce à Celtel, Mo Ibrahim conquiert les Africains et les propulse dans une nouvelle ère, avant de partir en quête de bonne gouvernance à travers sa fondation éponyme qui évalue et récompense l'excellence des gouvernants africains.
You are a communication expert, and you also created and manage Celtel, which is a brand that everybody knows in Africa. Dr. Mo Ibrahim, are you ready to start le point?
Yes, I'm delighted.
So you are known as the man who brought mobile phones in Africa. You built this company called Celtel. Can you tell us how everything started?
I used to work in the mobile industry. I was an academic and did my research work in the area of mobile communications. That was before cellular. And when the development of the new technology started, we were at the middle of that, at the center of the research work at the time. And I got my doctorate in mobile communications and continued to work at university in my research. British Telecom invited me to join them as the technical director of the new cellular company. They were starting here in '83. I designed the first UK mobile network. Shortly after that, I left BT and I started my own company, which is MSI, which is specialized in designing mobile networks. We probably designed half the European GSM networks at the time. And because of our work in MSI designing networks all over the world, the company grew. We ended with some 16 or 17 subsidiaries in Europe and in Asia, or in China, or in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, in Brazil, in the United States. I was disturbed when we noticed that nobody is developing networks in Africa, where everybody was running, try to capture franchise or licenses for operating mobile networks in Europe and Asia, elsewhere. We raised this question with a number of our clients. Our clients actually were the large telecom companies around the world. Nobody was interested. There was this perception of Africa that's really difficult to operate. You see, the difference between building a mobile network and mining, for example, for diamonds or other materials is that in those industries you go and take out resources, ship it out the countries and sell it. Mobile networks, actually, you are not taking anything out of the country. You are putting all your plants in the country and then you are selling the service. So this means a huge upfront investment, and it's not a kind of investment where if there is a problem you can ship it, you can just leave, take it with you home, because you cannot do that. So the perception of risk was quite high. That was rather disturbing because for all its problems, Africa is not that risky. There's a big gap between perception and reality there. So we decided to go and do our own, build our networks in Africa. And that's how we started. I started another company, which is Celtel, Of course, the first company was quite successful, and that enabled us to have the funds to start the second company.
So you went there with your own funds?
We started, yes, with our own funds, but of course we were surprised about the strong growth of demand, and growth of demand means investments, because you have to keep investment in plants to meet that demand. So there's a huge capital requirement, which was very difficult at that time to get, because global banks just at that time don't do Africa. So we could not raise debt really, which was a little bit surprising given we had operations in about 14 countries. We're all successful, and we were the largest taxpayer in probably 10 countries in Africa.
How did you manage to sell mobile phones in Africa at a time when we had many infrastructure problems, poverty issues? Most of the people were refusing to do business there. So how did you manage to sell it?
Actually, selling it was much easier than what we thought. We could not really effectively meet the demand. We were just kept running, to keep our head above water. The reason behind this is precisely that, what the lack of infrastructure means. Let's discuss that in the context of mobile telephony. In a developed country, what's the role of a mobile call? What is the equity in a mobile call? Of course, it's wonderful if I can call you personally and get immediate response, but there is alternative ways two people can communicate. There is a strong and viable fixed network, which people can use a fixed phone. Maybe with less success than a mobile phone, but it is a resilient network and available. Transport is easy. Mail does work. You're guaranteed 24-hour delivery of post. In Africa, that's not the situation. There are not many alternatives. Fixed networks effectively doesn't exist. The skeleton of fixed lines. Africa is huge, space-wise. No roads, or significant roads, or efficient railways, so if you want to pass a message from one place to another in Africa, it's a major problem. It can take days, it can take weeks. That is a huge cost, actually, a big problem. So the equity or the value of a mobile phone in a place like Africa, given these conditions, is immense. It saves a huge amount of efforts and time and logistics, petrol, fuel, or whatever. That's why we did not really need marketing. We just need to establish the chains to provide the SIM cards or scratch cards or whatever. But the demand was huge, because people instinctively found that they can save money, they can save efforts, they can save time, and it's a service which matched very well the lack of infrastructure in Africa. So that's why it was so successful. Of course, that put a lot of pressure on us. Lack of an infrastructure means we have to lay all the backbone hardware and software in. So it was a mobile operation, but it had to fulfill a lot of the obligations of the fixed networks as well, because we have to supply that layer underneath the mobile layer. So that was costly, difficult, but as I said, what determined at the end is the success of the network was the demand. The demand was huge. So it is a weakness of the infrastructure in Africa which made the mobile phone such a huge success.
What about the poverty? Because many people thought they wouldn't be able to afford mobile phones.
That is a problem, the cost side. We use the same equipment used by the European operators. Same prices, even more, because we have to ship all the equipment to Africa. We also had to add on all these fixed layers of communication. Installing a base station, for example, the radio stations, which is the main element of a mobile network. You know, all these radio stations, we had maybe 10,000 of them across Africa, everywhere. This across the landscape of Africa was a major problem, because you have to find the means to transfer all this equipment into rural areas, into everywhere in the country, which sometimes is a big problem, most of the time actually. Then you install your equipment, you need power. Again, infrastructure problem in Africa, we don't have power, which means for each of these base stations, we have to install a generator. Once you install a generator, you need to install a standby generator, because you cannot afford to lose service. We have to provide service 24 hours. So you have to duplicate that. And then you have to put up backup batteries for any short intermission in the service. So this is all cost. And then every morning you have to send somebody to each of these thousands and thousands of radio stations all over the country. In some areas, inaccessible areas. You have to go and supply fuel. And you have to go and check the batteries and service them, etc. So a huge amount of effort have to be added on top, which all meant that the cost per minute to an operator in Africa is higher than the cost per minute for an operator in France or in UK or Germany or somewhere else. So the service is expensive, and there's no way to deal with that. And that was a worry, of course, because at the beginning we said, who's going to afford this service?
Exactly.
It's going to be a service for the elite, maybe, for the middle class. Even middle class will find it expensive. The surprise was that even the poor people found that even paying for an expensive call is saving much more money. If you are a farmer and you want to sell your tomatoes or your cucumbers, in the past, you don't know what price is there. You are cut out in the rural area somewhere and you have no idea. And then somebody comes to you and say, okay, you know what, tomatoes there, people throw it out because I'll be very kind to you, I'm going to give you a few cents. What do you do? What do you know? Now people know exactly what's going on. They're able to sell the products correctly. Fishermen know where to land their fish, what prices they bring everywhere before even they come shore. So they found that actually a phone call, even an expensive phone call, saves them much more money.
You've seen the evolution of the mobile industry. People, as you said, are able to call to know the price of the products on the market. Some people can pay their bills through a phone. First, could you foresee that? Were you able to envision that it would be that way?
To be honest, I wish I said I was smart enough to see that, but that would be dishonest. None of us could see that. What we saw is a need. We know there is a need, we know there is a market, and we thought it would be a success. What we do not realize, what a huge success it will be. That's why we're all caught into this. In 7 or 8 years of operations, until the company was sold, we did not take $1 from the company. We did not, because every penny we raised was reinvested in the country again. Every penny raised, and that was not enough. Every 6 months or 8 months, we need to have a round of finance to get more money in order to invest more. It was really a fast moving train, really. And we had to keep clinging to it to make sure that we don't fall by the side.
Do you think, following your example, we could have tomorrow an Orange or a Vodafone company run and created by Africans? And also, do you think it would be possible to use those services within Africa meaning erasing the borders.
One thing we did in Celtel actually, we fought very hard to try and offer a seamless network across Africa, because it just makes sense. Instead of putting separate operations in each country, if you can amalgamate that in one operation, it saves a lot of money. It makes sense. It's more efficient. The problems always would have been the regulation and the obsession of each country with its own perceived sovereignty. I always give the example of Kinshasa and Brazzaville. Telephone costs between the two were really huge, because calls were used to be routed to France, then to Belgium, then back. Imagine the cost of this, how many satellite hubs you have to use, and it's extremely expensive. So when we sold our networks in the two countries, we said it's no sense. I mean, we had built our own satellite stations and also in each country, because we had international license too. So we can take the calls and bounce it up between Brazzaville and Kinshasa. And we said, why? It affects the quality of the call, is more expensive, and these two cities are, you can see each other across the water. I mean, it's not, so why don't we just put a microwave hub along the two, big capacity, very cheap, and then become like a local call. It took us over 1 year to convince regulators that in their interest. Both regulators were happy for us to take the calls, send the satellite to the other country. But they're not happy for us to connect the two countries together, which was very, very strange. I'm trying to use polite words here. And it took us a year to convince. In the first week, we managed to connect the two together. The traffic increased 60 times. That's 6,000%. Because the cost came down, of course, and suddenly people start talking to each other. So we say, look, so this was the issue across Africa, how to have enlightened government leaders to really appreciate it's better for their own people. If Africa really losing this border controls between each other, which is meaningless, because people actually, all our borders are porous. And people just move across any time, anywhere. But if you want to do it legally, it's a problem. Exactly. And that doesn't help. It doesn't help the industry, doesn't help business, doesn't help the people at the end. I remember we introduced, which was quite useful, was introduce free roaming between our operations. So even with prepaid cards, you can move from Uganda to Kenya to, anywhere. You just, without any extra charges. This is something Europe now is fighting to implement in Europe, but they haven't done it yet. We have done it some years ago. Still, again, some resistance from some governments and some, here we have the commissioners in Europe beating the Vodafones and Orange over the head to force them to lower the cost of roaming, not even make it free, just to lower the cost. We, the operators, we offer that to our regulators in Africa. Some of them will not allow it. So we say, actually, you work for your people or what? The sad story about mobile phones in Africa is that while we have more phones than the Europeans, not a single phone is made in Africa. What people do in other countries, I mean, if you take China as an example, if Nokia or Ericsson or whoever want to sell a single phone in China, they had to build a factory. They have to transfer know-how. Okay? And you cannot just go and sell. And that's how China was built. You want to sell a car in Africa, in China, you have to build a factory. You want to, now, as long as each African country or each or any company operating in any of these countries go for procurement for one small country, you have no power. You don't have the market power to dictate your terms because you don't have the market size. Okay? So if a car company want to go and sell some cars in one African countries, in Benin or in, okay, how many cars are going to sell there? So the government cannot tell them, no, you have to build a factory here if you want to sell cars. It doesn't work. But if Africa was procuring for Africa, then it's a different story. It's like China now. What's the difference between China and Africa? China is the same size like Africa, people-wise. Okay, although Africa much bigger size, but population-wise. But China has a power of a market of 1.3 billion people. That's huge. Then you dictate your terms. Then you ensure transfer of technology. Then you ensure the building of factories and facilities there. We are 54 countries. None of us have the power to force manufacturers to do anything. So that's why we end up being consumers, not producers. We have to build that common market in Africa. We need that common market, and our leaders need to understand that's essential. The problem is each leader, or, even sometimes population, are afraid of their neighbors. You say, okay, let's break out, erase these borders. Oh, those guys are gonna come and take our jobs and migrate here, and what is gonna happen? Everybody is gonna go and move to one place, or what? I mean, Africa is huge. People thinking negatively, as if integration threatens their jobs. They don't think that it gives them opportunity also to do work in other countries and trade. So we need to get over that barrier. People need to understand what integration means. And it means prosperity for everybody. It means better trade between Africa, and our trade now is only 14%, our African trade, which is a very low number. So we need to work on that.
Mo Ibrahim, you also what we call the outsider philanthropist. After Celtel, you've created your foundation called the Mo Ibrahim Foundation for African Development. Can you tell us a bit about this foundation that aims to bring good governance in Africa?
Having spent a number of years building different things in Africa, etc., and the time come to retire from that, and it was only natural for me to see what we can do now. And I don't think of what I'm doing as philanthropy, by that narrow definition of philanthropy, because we are not giving blankets or baby's milk or stuff like that, because there's a number of people already doing that, and that's great. Thank you very much for doing this. But our approach is slightly different, because we think, to start with, Africa is not poor. Okay? Africa have a lot of resources under its soil, over the land, in the seas. They have a lot of resources. And Africa continent is huge. It's huge, size-wise. African people are not that many. We are less than the Indian people. We're less than Chinese people. Just, about those guys, 1.3, 1.2 billion. We're about 1 billion. So we're less than those guys. You can take all China, land mass, put it in Africa. Take India, put it in Africa. Take Europe, put it in Africa. Take United States, put it in Africa. Take Canada, put it in Africa. Still you have some space for a few other countries. We have huge space there. So the question we need to ask is, why, if we people have this huge continent for ourselves and have all these resources, why are we poor? That's the question we really want to address. And I don't think we need just to run into, okay, let us provide some aid for the needy and the guys in the refugee camps and people are, of course, humanitarian aid is always a wonderful form of solidarity, but that doesn't deal with the problem. The problem is, why are we poor? Why are we in refugee camps? Why women are being raped? Why children are malnutritioned? Why? This is a question African people need to face. We don't need to hang on what the financial situation in Europe with the financial crisis means that less aid now, so what the hell are going to do? Why? We need to move out of this dependency, and we need to face the main questions. Well, I think that the answer to this is in African governance. Okay? So we have an issue with African governance. The way we are governing our people, our resources, we cannot just push it under the carpet and pretend it doesn't exist. It is a problem. I hate it when we say all colonial system, and everybody has been colonized. America was a colony. Yeah? America was a colony. China was a colony. India was a colony. Everybody was colonized at some stage. That's the history of the world. Now, we got our independence over 40, 50 years ago. What have we done with it? We cannot just fall into this mentality of victims. You know, we are victims. We're not victims of anybody. We are victims of ourselves. Okay? If we had the opportunity, we'd have colonized our people, other people. Now we have our independence. We are in control of our people and our resources. What have we done with that? That's the question we need to ask. Did we manage our resources correctly? Or have we given our resource cheaply? For few bobs, we put it in the banks and offshore. Did we really seek to bring harmony to our people? We played ethnic cards, we played religious cards. We did all what we can as leaders, really just to stay in power, to enjoy the fruits of power, you know, to have our wonderful, you know, villas in Paris and in Côte d'Azur. Is that acceptable? Not acceptable. So we need to look at ourselves. We need a new generation of leaders who will really come to serve. A leader's job is to serve, a servant to the people, not an owner of the country and the people and the resources.
This is very challenging.
I know.
So how do you respond to that, to all those governments that think that you are a threat maybe to them through this foundation and through this aim that you're really fighting for?
The beauty of my situation is that I don't need anything from anybody. I'm not seeking a contract from anybody. I'm not seeking a license, or I'm not seeking a job. Okay, I'm unemployed. I don't need anybody to employ me. So I'm a free person. And as a free person, I stand up and say, I say what I believe. They like it, they like it. Don't like it, they don't. That's their problem. So unless we speak out and we change things, nothing will change. We should not censor ourselves, because nothing will change.
When you sold Celtel, the staff shared $500 million, and it was actually your idea. So you made people millionaires after that. Some of them were Africans, of course. Is it easy for you to get the attention of those leaders when you speak out? Is it easy to pass on the message?
Our message really is to the African people, especially young people, because what we know, we want, hope is that for people to start to talk about governance. The word governance is a mouthy word. It's not easy. It's not sexy. It's not governance. You know, it's not. But we want people to keep seeing it, governance, and then what is governance? We need to simplify that. So that's why we produce the index, for example, because we say it's something that can be measured. Okay, so it's not poetry, it's not slogan, it's not shouting, it's not dancing, it's not. It's something that can be measured. Let us go and measure what exactly has been done. How many kilometers of road was being paved last year? How many kids been to schools? Women, what's happening to women? You guys still raping them? You're still denying them rights? What's happening to the women? What's happening to the economy? What about the rule of law? What about judiciary? What about this? So we try to measure all aspects of governance, produce a scorecard, we give it to the people and to the leaders. It's just a mirror which reflects what exactly happening on the ground. The most beautiful thing in the world are numbers, because they are absolutely well defined and clear. There is no interpretation. There is no, okay, so we need to give people data, facts. So truth is beautiful. We'll give people the truth. This is what's happening in your country. Then it's up to you. You have your discussion with your leaders, etc. And to their credit, some African leaders are very interested in this work. And many times when I visit people now, it's working sessions. In the past, you go and meet a leader, it is a photo opportunity, it is a cup of tea, it is this, is that. But now people say, okay, let's open this and have a look. See why we're doing this. Then they call the minister, say, what is this? Why is this happening this way? Why those guys are doing better than us? Because they can see what's happening around them with the score of other countries. Why are we going down when those guys are going up? Stimulate and also trying to find what works and what doesn't work. It's something which helps those who govern and those who are governed. That's what we're trying to propose with the index.
What results have you seen so far?
I think what we see is a greater interest in the index. For example, business are using the index extensively, business people. Because before they invest in a country, you don't exactly see what's the rule of law in this country, what's happening, so they use the index. Actually, we have seen a lot of application in the business people. They take the data and put it in a different format, etc., to sell it to other companies as well, which, well, anyway, good luck, because we offer it for free. Then the international development community, all use the index, everybody, and they need to see who's doing what's the outcome. And then we give it to institutions in Africa, parliaments, we give it to universities, we give it to obedient forums, etc. Of course, we give it to the governments. Even the leaders who don't like the fact that we're doing the index, because frankly, some people don't like to be judged, because they see it as a way of judging them. But they are forced to pay attention, because whenever they go and talk seriously to a bank or to international development, asking for a loan or asking for, I mean, people are going to quote the index, so you need to be ready for that. So it started to, you know, it takes time to really build a brand around the index. But I think it's moving in the right direction.
You've also extended your fight for transparency and good governance, your fight against corruption. What is your view on governance and business?
We cannot just talk about corruption and transparency and we keep beating up on political leaders. Because for every corrupt political leader, there is at least a dozen corrupt business people. And we need to talk about the two in the same breath. So that is why we keep raising these issues. And we also need to have conversation with the developed countries, because corruption was legal in Europe until the year 2000. Actually, it was tax deductible. To their credit, the Americans were the first people to introduce the Foreign Corruption Act in 1980 something. It took Europe like 15 years to match that, which raises a question also about the moral backbone of Europe. The same guys who stand on the soapboxes lecturing everybody about, you know, good governance, and they themselves really are not above bar, and they have a lot to answer. And they introduced the law in 2000. 15 years later, it's only legitimate to stop and ask how many corruption cases was brought to the court in France, in Germany, in Sweden, in Denmark. Why there's this reluctance to enforce the law? Does it mean there is no corrupt French business people, no corrupt German business people? We need to hold also European leaders accountable, because if they don't take a firm stand here, they become partner in corruption. And that is a fact. The cases of corruption brought against European companies for corruption in Africa or elsewhere in America far exceed the number of cases brought against European companies in Europe. So say, what is happening? Is the US legal system dealing with the corruption of the European companies what the European legal system is doing? And these companies pay huge amount of fines to the American Treasury for their corruption. So we ask our friends in Europe, you guys are having severe financial problems, you can do some of this money. Why don't you take these fines instead of the Americans? So Europe needs to strengthen its moral backbone too, and that raises the issue that the corruption is a global problem. It's not an African problem, it's a global problem, and everybody needs to work on it.
So what is the next step for the Mo Ibrahim Foundation?
I think we are not likely to see a drastic change in our direction. We need to continue what we're doing. It's a huge subject and it never stops. We need to just deepen our involvement. I mean, we started with the index and the prize, and then we started to work a little bit on the area of young leadership, and we instituted a number of scholarships and some fellowships, which were interesting. Then we started to have this annual conference to bring African people to discuss crucial issues. We had, I think, 4 or 5 forums so far. Each forum is focused on one subject, and we discussed, as I said, agriculture, we discussed youth, we discussed economic integration, regional integration of Africa. They will discuss the issue of the African Union and where Africa is going last year. This year in Accra, we'll hope to discuss the issue of African cities. We started also to try to connect with young people a little bit more because that's the future of Africa. So we, together with some of the wonderful artists in Africa, we started to do concerts around our weekly event. Every year we have this weekly event of governance. And, you know, Youssou N'Dour, Angelique Kidjo, you know, and of course other people also come. And it's not a question just of having a good time, but having a good time in the context of governance and African unity, etc., to give young people that sense of where we're going or where we should go.
Coming back to the Mo Ibrahim Prize, if today you could take any international head of state, not only in Africa, but to lead Africa with all the issues that you've raised, who would it be and why?
It's a difficult question, you know, because exceptional leadership by its nature is rare. You have leaders, you have politicians, and but the people who come and really change the course of the country for the better, who have or who made this difficult decision sometimes. People are running their countries based on the tabloids, headlines, and opinion polls, what is popular, what's not. And they shrank out from making decisions. We have crisis of governance, really, worldwide. It's difficult to find some really shining example. I mean, I think President Lula, for example, in Brazil, did a wonderful job in the way he tried to cut subsidies and then pass credits directly to the poor, encourage them. You put your kid in a school, you get credit, you get money for that. That was smart, really helping a lot of poor people to come out of poverty. I think that's great. In Europe, you can see it's difficult.
It is, definitely.
You know, you have
Because you know
Berlusconi, you have Miserovic, you have a lot of funny characters around here, a lot of jokers. So, you know, and people complain when we cannot find an African leader. Although we managed to get 3 or 4, you know, anyway.
What kind of example and legacy you would like to leave?
Everything was possible. I was a poor kid in Africa. I had the luck to be able to study and came here to finish my studies, and I come from a poor family. And I found myself in a position where, you know, I developed quite a lot in all aspects, and if I can do that, I'm sure some other young African people can do that, or even more. So everything is possible, you know. Anybody can do something with their life. That's really important. Once you do something, never forget who you are or who you come from. And I always said I'll be very happy to be remembered as an African boy who remembered his people.
You also remembered as someone who gets many awards. You were cited by the Time magazine to be one of the 100 influential people of this planet. You've been seen as the black man, the most influential black man in Britain, and you've got awards all the time. So how do you see that? How do you reflect on that?
It's always nice, you know, if anybody offer you a medal or an award, you say, yeah, thank you, it's nice, it's not expected. I never worked for it, or I aimed for it.
Does it add a pressure on you?
No, not really. Not really, because I'm not out to achieve anything. I don't want to be a politician. I don't want to be a president of a country. I don't want to be anything. I don't want to be chief executive of a company. I don't want that. That's all behind me, you know. So I really don't need anything from anybody, and that's wonderful to be free. You know, and then you speak your mind. You do what you'd like to do. Actually, the most wonderful thing actually pride I have, is not the medals, it's not the titles I get. You go to one of these conferences and you speak, and then minister from this country, European country, American, whatever, or some, they come and say, Mo, thank you very much. You said things I would like to say, but I cannot say. This I hear all the time, you know, from people who will be amazed, very powerful people, but because of constraints of their offices or their business or whatever, they cannot come out and say it. So to be in a position to say, well, to speak the unspeakable, that's wonderful. We need people who are able to go out and tell it as it is. And those people need to be free people. So, you know, I hope to see more free people around who really go and just, you know, tell us as it is, without any personal interest or vested interest.
So while we're doing this interview with Dr. Mo Ibrahim, I'm going to ask him what he thinks about this interview sequence called stippling. If I say Africa, Dr. Mo Ibrahim, what is your question mark?
Wasted opportunity.
What is your exclamation mark?
Are we going to find a solution for that?
What are your ellipses, your thoughts?
I think we will.
What is the biggest strength of Africa?
It's people.
What is the biggest weakness of Africa?
It's leaders.
How would you define Africa with your own words?
A wonderful place, wonderful people, yet to really understand their potential fully.
And finally, Dr. Mo Ibrahim, what is your final point?
I believe we have a great future in Africa. It's just we need the leadership to really take us there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.